Hi, I'm Michael Conger. I'm the Entrepreneurship and Strategy Professor for the Prime Summer Program. As we saw in the last video, strategy is a kind of slippery concept. Ultimately, we discovered that strategy is about the way in which firms create value and organize resources. But more specifically, strategy is about the firm's theory of how they will be successful. Strategy is not planning, tactics, or execution. It's the overarching framework that drives those things. In this video, we address the obvious big question that follows. What makes a winning strategy? What are the things that shape a firm's theory of how they will succeed? What really matters in strategy? Over time, this question has gotten perhaps more attention from strategy researchers than any other. Many different ideas have been raised to answer it, and some have spawned hundreds of studies. Because, as we saw in the last video, all of them trace back to why firms exist in the first place, these ideas collectively have become known as different theories of the firm. Each offers a different perspective on what might really matter when it comes to a firm's strategy. We're going to take a whirlwind tour through 4 of the most prominent strategies of the firm, plus a bonus, starting right now. We met Jay Barney in the last video. He's widely credited with introducing what is called the resource-based view of the firm. In the resource perspective, what matters in strategy is the resources that a firm controls and how they're able to use them to create a sustainable competitive advantage over time. All firms have resources, but not all of them are strategic. Virtually every company you'll ever encounter has a sink and running water. That water is a resource they have access to, but it's obviously not strategic for most companies. So what makes a resource one that a firm can use to create a sustainable competitive advantage? Barney offers 4 characteristics of strategic resources: whether they're valuable, whether they're rare, whether they are inimitable, that is, difficult or impossible for other companies to copy, and whether there are other resources that can substitute for them. If a resource fits into one or more of these categories, it might lead to a sustainable competitive advantage for the firm. If it fits into all 4, it almost certainly will. This is Michael Porter. He's widely considered to be the most important proponent of the industrial organization, or I/O, perspective. Porter's view is that what matters most in determining a firm's strategy and whether that strategy will be successful is the nature of the industry in which the firm operates and the firm's unique position in it. Probably the best tool to wrap your head around this perspective is Porter's 5 forces model. It says that there are forces, all related to the firm's industry and its position in it, that largely determine what a firm can, should, and in some cases must do. As we walk through this, pick a firm that's interesting to you and keep it in mind. So when I am talking about the focal firm, substitute in the firm that you're thinking of. The horizontal axis of the model focuses on the market the firm is in. On the left, the bargaining power of suppliers. This means the companies that sell things to the focal firm. That's that firm you've been keeping in mind. The question is, how much power do suppliers have over that firm? For example, the companies that supply products to Walmart have very little bargaining power. They really need Walmart to make their business work, but Walmart can probably find new suppliers for almost anything that they need. On the right, the bargaining power of buyers. Here we're talking about the focal firm's customers. How much power do they have over the focal firm? Consider Walmart once again, but this time think of them as the focal firm. How much power do Walmart's customers have to dictate what Walmart can do? It turns out quite a bit, especially since over the last 20 years, Amazon has emerged as a very strong alternative to shoppers like you and me. And that's to say nothing of all the other online resources we can use to buy the products we want. The vertical axis of the model focuses on the industry that the firm is in. On the top, the threat of new entrants. How easy or hard is it for a new competitor to enter the same industry as the focal firm you chose? Well, before you answer, there's an important distinction that we need to make. We're not talking about how easy or hard it is for that new competitor to succeed in the industry, only how easy or hard it is for them to get started. So, for example, it's very hard to compete in the consulting industry, but it's incredibly easy to enter. All you really need is a business card. So the threat of new entrants for a focal firm in the consulting industry is very high. Their strategy has to account for the fact that there's nothing to stop hundreds of other new consultants from setting up shop every day. But the opposite is true in the airline industry. It takes an enormous amount of money before an airline's first flight ever leaves the airport. So the threat of new entrants is not something that existing airlines have to worry about too much. On the bottom, the threat of substitutes. This is not referring to competitors that do exactly what the focal firm does. Instead, it's about how much the focal firm has to worry about other products and services that customers might use instead. Netflix is a substitute for movie theaters and for cable TV. A live concert might be a substitute for a live sporting event. And in the midst of a recession, when people's budgets are tight, a nice bottle of wine might even be a substitute for a weekend getaway trip or even a full-blown vacation. The middle of the model simply considers how likely it is that firms in the industry do things because of what they see other firms doing. The classic example here is the soft drink industry, where Coke and Pepsi routinely introduce copycat products and openly admit to wanting to win at the other firm's expense. The big takeaway of the industry perspective is that what strategies firms can and should take are shaped by the nature of the industry and the position that they hold in it. One of the oldest theories of the firm is known as the behavioral view. This line of thinking originated from the work of scholars like Richard Cyert, James March, and Herb Simon. Now, they specifically focused on the decision-making process within the firm, but we can take a little license here and credit their work as the starting point for a broader range of research focused on the practices and routines generally within firms as the thing that matters in strategy. This would include, of course, decision-making processes, as they said, but also management and work team structure, work practices, leadership, or pretty much anything else you can think of that pertains to processes within the firm itself. Williamson's work on transaction cost economics was highly influential and complemented that of his mentor and fellow Nobel laureate, Ronald Coase. I won't do justice to their ideas here, but for the purposes of our discussion, they point us to another long-standing theory of the firm, that the thing that matters in strategy is whether and how firms can manage transaction costs. In simple terms, transaction costs are the extra things that cause friction in doing business with another firm. Over and above the costs of actually doing their work, firms have to deal with the possibility that the people they're dealing with may try to take advantage of them. They also have to contend with the reality that not all parties involved have the same information, and that it's simply not possible for any one firm to make sense of all the possible ways that a business transaction may not go according to plan. All of these things cause friction in the process, and that friction means additional cost. Writing contracts, hiring lawyers, negotiation and renegotiation of terms, you name it. All transaction costs. The transaction cost perspective suggests that the way firms handle these transaction costs really matters to their strategy. Solutions to transaction cost problems, like partnerships or joint ventures with other firms, establishing systems to monitor all parties' behaviors, and even the decision to avoid the transaction altogether and just do the work in-house instead, are all examples of strategic decisions aimed at reducing transaction costs. Of course, there are many, many other things that really do matter in strategy. As just one example, here's the bonus that I promised you at the beginning of the video. A firm's image, identity, and culture can all really matter when it comes to strategy. Think about companies like Google or Patagonia or New Belgium Brewing Company. All of these make strategic decisions based on their identity and culture. The fact is, companies are made up of people, and people affect strategy in ways that go beyond economics, resources, and competitive landscape. Although it's helpful to look at strategy through the lenses of these theoretical perspectives, the way firms develop and practice their strategy in the real world is much more pragmatic and definitely not limited to any one of these perspectives. In the end, most of us would come to the conclusion that, in fact, all of these things matter when it comes to strategy. I hope I've given you a few new ways to think about this, and more importantly, that you've started to think about how strategy might matter in the work that you will do in the future. Hey, a lot of the stuff we cover in this video is based on the work and ideas of a lot of really great researchers and practitioners. Links to some of their work and some tools that are useful for understanding a firm's strategy or developing your own are included in the description below and on the Course Canvas site, in case you want to go a little deeper. And of course, I'm happy to talk to you anytime. The easiest way to get in touch with me is through my website, profconger.com.